Bima, Rabbis Efrem Goldberg, Philip Moskowitz, and Josh Broide are taking you behind the Bima. The BRS rabbis schmooze about contemporary issues and talk to special guests who give a behind-the-scenes look at how they got to where they are and what keeps them going. Welcome to Behind the Bima.
Good evening. It's Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Rabbi Efrem Goldberg, joined by my colleague and dear friend, Rabbi Joshua Broide. We're here to take you
Behind the Bima.
Behind the Bima, the special Yom HaShoah edition of Behind the Bima, as tonight is Yom HaShoah, which really is a perfect segue to thank our sponsors this evening. I want to thank my Machatanim, Bruce and Jill Minsky, dear friends and Machatanim, who sponsored tonight's episode in memory of my in-laws' parents. That is my wife's parents' parents. So in memory of the parents of Dr. Rabbi and Judy Brookstein, Aaron Halevi and Esther Goldsmith, and Yisrael Nelson and Chaya Esther Brookstein, 3 out of 4 of whom were survivors. The Brooksteins, my wife's, Bobby and Zaidi, were incredible people, survivors of Auschwitz. Each of them lost a spouse and a child in the war. They're first cousins who were drawn to one another as children, but they grew up really hardcore Hasidim in Hungary, and their family didn't allow for that and other reasons. But when they both survived and they had lost everyone, they went back to their hometown. There was no one to say that they couldn't be together. And so they got married. They had only my father-in-law, which is why my wife exists, which is why my children exist. So it's they have an extraordinary story. And my wife's Opa, Arnold Goldsmith from Muncie, those who know Arnold Goldsmith, and later Miami Beach and Israel. He was a towering figure in physical height and also a person of tremendous emunah and faith who had lost everyone and everything, came to this country with I'd say the shirt on his back. I don't think he even had that, and rebuilt. So I'm deeply grateful to my Machatanim who've sponsored this evening in honor of those 4, 3 of whom were survivors. And that gives tonight a lot of meaning as it is Yom HaShoah. So Rabbi Broide, normally tonight we'd be doing a live hookup with you. We here in Boca, and despite Poland being several hours ahead in time zone, we'd be doing a live hookup with you and the students of the March of the Living. What happened with the March of the Living this year?
Yeah, this was actually not due to COVID. This was actually due to the war. 2 years due to COVID, and now a third year. And when you think about the fact that it's 15,000, 18,000, 12,000, the numbers are so big in terms of the educational reach that the opportunity these kids have to go and travel back to Auschwitz, back to these camps with survivors. You saw that tonight. This is not going to be happening for many, many more years. It's the end of another era. When Sam, that's what I was trying to tell you at the beginning. He was actually not that the march was going to go and then got canceled again. Sam was actually scheduled to go as a 98-year-old. He's not stopping.
Sam Ron is our guest tonight.
Yeah.
And our guest, we were supposed to include Jack as well, who the friend with whom he had a reunion after almost 80 years. Unfortunately, Jack's not feeling well, so unable to join us. But Sam's got an extraordinary story on his own, and we'll talk about that reunion with Jack just a month ago when they saw each other for the first time in nearly 80 years. So Sam has been on 11 March of the Living. 11 times he relived and walked back on that. It's not a hallowed ground; it's a tragic ground of Poland. And you were there with how many times? With him?
Yeah, probably 10 or 11 times with him. I showed him that picture when we were walking. I went into your office. I showed him the picture with Rabbi Steinhardt, and
that's right.
And he was that was actually before he went, so he couldn't even recognize anyone in that picture.
It's an interesting night tonight, Yom HaShoah. And again, even if you're listening, you're catching up on Behind the Bima later this week or at a later date. It's no longer Yom HaShoah, but it's a fascinating thing because unlike Pesach, whatever denomination of Jew you are, religious, non-religious, whatever background, you honor the same calendar that says Pesach. Pesach's a universal Jewish holiday, and we all kept it. And Yom HaShoah, there are segments of the Jewish community who do not observe and do not keep, and there is some controversy around it. People are sometimes surprised to learn that Rabbi Soloveitchik was not in favor of Yom HaShoah. He felt that we have a date on our calendar that contains within it collectively all of Jewish tragedy and calamity through the years. Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is designated as the inauspicious day on our calendar. It is in perpetuity a day of Jewish grief and mourning collectively, and we include and invoke within it not only the destruction of the 2 temples, the 2 Batei Mikdash, but the Crusades and Inquisition and the Holocaust is part of Tisha B'Av and should be mourned on Tisha B'Av, not at a different day. And yet, the state of Israel, obviously, and it's a whole history to this. Rabbi J.J. Schachter has an article about the history of Yom HaShoah. when it was introduced, and different days that were considered, and the vote that took place, and the controversy around it. But my feeling is that as long as we have survivors, it's not a matter of what you believe or what you want or what you think objectively or how you wish our calendar was marked. If there are survivors, and for them, they want to see a program that is full, because that gives meaning to their suffering. They know that their story will continue to be told. Then I think we have a moral obligation to honor them and support them and show them the love that they so deserve. I mean, survivors.
You saw that tonight when they came up and lit those candles. The fact that you didn't give them a microphone, they didn't need a microphone. As soon as they lit a candle, like for anyone else, it was okay. Let me just take the match. Let me light the candle. For them, they yelled out names. Those names are people that they lost, and for them, that was a special moment.
Right. And we've had, since I've been here, we've had Yom HaShoah programs. And as I say, whatever your personal view or whatever the controversy around it, to me, it's about respecting and honoring survivors. And really, I think every survivor I've ever known, they loved their family, and it was all about the continuity of their family, but they were also so concerned and devoted to their story continuing to be told.
Yeah.
Right? One of the big fears of survivors, whether they articulate it or not, is that we'll move on, that it'll become part of history. And not from obviously some ego standpoint, like tell my story, but meaning it's so important to the Jewish people. It's our story, and to learn from it, the lessons of it, and to go forward and to make sure it's not repeated. So that's why I think that we've got to do it. And, it used to be 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, when you and I were first here, and the Yom HaShoah program at Boca Raton Synagogue, there's a big table in the front, and there are 6 large 7-day candles, and then a ton of little tea lights around it. And we always begin by calling up survivors to light the big candles. And it used to be even a little complicated, because you had many more than 6 survivors. So who would be, so to say, honored with lighting the 6 big candles, and who would be relegated to the little tea lights?
Right.
So the fact that second and third generation light tea lights, got it. But it used to be which survivors, who were the older ones, or whose story was the most remarkable. And tonight, 6 large 7-day candles, 2 survivors. 2 survivors.
Yeah.
Shul think I was full, hundreds of people, and 2 survivors who were there to light candles. And that just tells you everything, So it's the end of an era and a generation, and it's a really sad time.
Yeah. And it was interesting on the way back. So I was talking to Sam and his wife in the car, and I asked him, I said, how did you think it went? Like, are you okay? And he says, first of all, he was so happy with the reception, and he really felt like he said, I'm just being honest, I'm speaking tomorrow night somewhere else. And I don't even know what the story is going to be, because I just know the people I'm talking to. There happens to be, it's an older group, let's just say, in the community. And he's like, I don't think that they're really interested. So he was so happy to feel that reception there. And he says,
did you see? I just interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He kept looking at his watch.
I know.
And then he kept looking back at me. Again, we're gonna. This is the interview tonight.
Yeah.
So you'll hear this was our Yom HaShoah program, and this is our interview tonight to share. So appropriate any day of the year to hear a survivor tell their story, but particularly tonight, Yom HaShoah. He kept looking at his watch as if to say to me, like, I'm probably boring people, or let me make this quick, or let me wrap this up. And it was like, you're almost 98 years old. You have 100 years of stories to tell. Take your time. No one's going anywhere.
Yeah. We're here
to hear your story. How much longer do we have to hear it?
Right.
Like, speak. But so it's interesting to see that he's concerned about that.
Yeah. And it's funny because he said, I just want you to know, I'm completely honest. I'm not like the others that tell you what you want to hear. He says, I tell you the way I feel. It might not be the politically correct thing to do or to say. And he just wanted you to know that. So everything you're about to hear is what he calls the heart. Straight from the heart.
I think once you hit 97, your filter's kind of gone.
Yeah.
You just say it is. But what a story.
What a story. And something else I asked. I said, I asked him about his kids. Now you don't get to hear that because that wasn't part of the thing, but he does have kids. But one of his children, his daughter, has cerebral palsy.
Oh, wow.
So just imagine, you, like you said, you recounted every one of the challenges he has been through, and now he finally made it, right? And he gets to America. And one of the reasons I actually stayed in America as opposed to going back to Israel was better care back in the 50s for a daughter that had cerebral palsy. But he said he just went to Chicago. They're there all the time. Like, they just want to be with family. And, sometimes.
Yeah, we're not spoiling the interview, but we'll tell you as you watch or listen. Just watch it as he's talking about the Holocaust. He's talking about being hidden in a barn, then being in concentration camps, then being on a death march, and then and then being shot at by Arabs, and then fighting, and now you're saying he has a Charles Survivor, and all he does is smile and laugh, and as we finished up the interview, you won't hear this. He turns to me, he goes, "I think now I should get free membership at the synagogue." And then he couldn't stop laughing. He cracked himself up. But
I told him he has honorary membership. I said,
you have to believe that part of the ingredients of survival is that optimism, that hope, that positive demeanor, that ability to laugh and smile, even on Yom HaShoah talking about this. There's no question he's mourning and grieving what he lost. I mean,
he said there's not a moment that goes by where he's not thinking about those train tracks.
He hears the train tracks in his mind all the time. Yechaved's grandparents and Shani's grandparents that were tonight is in memory of. They used to go to sleep with the radio on. It was like a big question Shabbos Yontif because they were very, very Erlicha people, but they couldn't go to sleep. If it were quiet, their mind would go back to those images, those experiences, those sounds. And so they slept with the radio on. They couldn't not sleep with the radio on. So we don't know. You meet a survivor and you don't realize that there's this background noise, literally, figuratively, metaphorically, this background noise playing in their life all the time. And part of the extraordinary part of being a survivor is that they don't wear that on their sleeve. They're not telling it to you. They're not asking for sympathy about it. They're not feeling entitled because of it. They went out there, they're the greatest generation. They rebuilt. Think about, we were talking about the builders of Elizabeth, New Jersey, elsewhere, but survivors, they rebuilt. They didn't say hey world, you let this happen to us, so now set up a little comfortable place where we don't have to work and you take care of us. They worked hard and they founded yeshivas and schools and shuls and mikvahs and sacrificed for continuity.
And even now, I'm saying this guy has every reason in the world just to sit back, relax, retire. And he's traveling to Poland.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We did a trip to Poland a couple of years ago, and we had 40 members of the shul. It was an amazing, amazing trip, a real diversity from the shul. You had every segment and every background and every level of observance. And the first night, I don't remember if I told this on Behind the Bima, you'll stop me, except that you won't remember either. Where's our fact checker? But the first night, it doesn't matter what age you are, everyone acts like kids, right? So the first night, everybody sits for dinner at their tables based on their clique, right? So the more this crowd sat there, and the more that crowd sat there, and this age group sat that, and the ones that look like that, and you send your kids to school sat there, everybody's apart. And I got up at dinner and I said, chevra, nobody went to the gas chamber based on where their kid went to school, or the yarmulke they wore, or what nusach they davened, what level of observance they were. I said, so our goal is very simple. By the end of this trip, we're all mixed, we're all integrated, we're all mingled together. And from that trip, incredible friendships formed of people with such diversity, you'd never believe it or imagine it. So the trip was predominantly second generation. It was mostly people whose parents were survivors. And being back in Poland and walking Majdanek, Auschwitz, Boca now, Treblinka, obviously there's not a lot left there. And even just being in Warsaw and Krakow and the other places that we went and saw, and you've been there so many times, what they had heard from their parents or imagined about their parents came to life. And they were overwhelmed in pain on this trip because most their parents were no longer here. And now they had so many questions and so much they wanted to know. But one person got up, I won't say his name. He got up and he was very emotional. He's a pretty stoic person. And he got up, he was very emotional. And he just started crying. He couldn't control himself. And he said, I always thought my father was like a nebuch and I was a hero. It's like my father worked in the post office. He had no education. He worked in the post office. I remember this was the night after we walked Auschwitz. And he said, I'm a successful business person and I have certain esteem and prominence and success in life. So I looked at my father like I've far surpassed him. He got up there and he said, I lived with a malach, with an angel, and I never knew it. He said, my father lived in this place. He survived this place. And the fact that he took care of us and gave us a life and a family and stayed true to Hashem, to God, and to religion. He said, I lived with an angel and I never knew it. I'm a nothing and my father was an angel and I can't tell him and I can't talk to him and I can't take care of him in that way now. He was so broken by that. So if you have a survivor, if you have access to a survivor, go get a bracha. Go get a bracha.
Oh, there was a long line tonight, right? People right afterwards, people would take pictures. And it's like funny who you think your heroes are. You take pictures with people that you admire. And
these are people that, how many years did we neglect them? They're in shul. They've got a funny accent. Maybe they have numbers in their arm. Maybe once a year we hear their story a little bit. But these are angels who lived among us. Today I joke, but I'm partially not joking. Today somebody's like, my Wi-Fi is slow. There's no God. I stubbed my toe. There's no God. Right? Or I had a middle seat on the flight, or we would delay. There's no God. And the survivors,
Right.
like I lost my parents, all my
Right.
siblings. My whole town was killed. I lost everything I knew. I was robbed of going to school.
Right.
I was hated. And you know what? I put on tefillin every
Yeah.
day. I dive into Hashem and so on.
You're the same thing on the March of Living. When the teenagers are with the survivors, they're like, I can't believe we're walking all day in the freezing cold. And you look at them and the survivors are like, you mean, I'm sorry, in your nice boots and, you know.
So sorry in your $300 jacket.
So,
Right.
so it's just a little bit different. And I was
That's
just
not-
talking.
we can't
Yeah.
live that way that we don't feel ever sad by our challenges because, hey, at least we're not in the Holocaust. We're not
Right.
suggesting that. What we are suggesting is that we latch on to their faith. You know, I'm a
Exactly.
big believer in, and I admire the recovery community, addiction community, recovery community. And one of the underlying principles of recovery is submitting to a higher power, right? When you stop thinking that you can control it, you stop thinking you're in charge. One of the steps of recovery, the 12 steps, is submitting to a higher power. So there's a young, great guy connected to our community. He's not in our community, and he's in recovery for many years, and such courage. And I'm always honored when someone shares it with me and lets me learn from it. So he told me once he was listening to an Amunah share, and he said, I want to tell you something. He said, you know, what happens if you're in recovery and you struggle with believing in God? You struggle with the higher power. So how do you submit to the higher power when you struggle in believing in a higher power? So he said in recovery, there's an idea that you find somebody with the higher power and you submit to his higher power. In other words, you're saying, I don't know. I have uncertainty. I have doubt. It's complicated. I don't know if I feel it. I don't feel connected right now. But you know what? I'm going to find somebody who's on fire, who's connected, who has faith, who is unshakable, and I'm going to latch on. I'm going to ride their coattails. I'm going to grab on the famous Bluzheva Rebbe story, jumping over the canyon. I held on to you. And who did you hold on to? So you submit to that higher power. So, you know, tonight, and this is a good segue, we'll bring Sam Ron on in a moment. You submit to his higher power. You know, Martin Judovitz, Olav Shalom, was a amazing survivor in our community. It's our first Yom HaShoah without him. We interviewed him last year, 2 years ago. Yom HaShoah, we asked him, how did you believe in Hashem? And he said, you know, I lost my mother, I lost my father, I had one parent left. Avinu Shabashamayim, I should lose him too. I should give up on God also. So he held on to that higher power. Sometimes when we struggle in less significant ways, significant for us, grab on and latch on to their higher power is a strategy, is something that we can do. It's something that we can do. So we had some technological problems at the beginning. The video may not be great quality, but it's well worth watching, listening. Sam's an amazing person, really amazing, real, positive, and hopeful. And when you hear his story, contains everything from losing everybody to fighting on behalf of the founding of the state of Israel.
Yeah.
It's got everything to it. It's really well worth listening to. And we're grateful that he came. We're sorry Jack was unable to be here, but Sam will talk about what that was like reuniting with him. And we'll see on the other side. We'll talk a little bit about Pesach and some other things that are going on. So without any further ado, Sam Ron.
Great honor to be able to welcome Sam Ron to be with us this evening, giving tremendous meaning to our Yom HaShoah, program. And our other guest, Sam's longtime friend. Sorry, excuse me. Jack, unfortunately, was not feeling well. Look at this. Jack is not feeling well, was unable to be here this evening. Before we begin, Jack unfortunately is not feeling well and was unable to be here this evening. He's in our thoughts and our tefillos. Please God, he should gain his strength and continue to speak together with you. Jack sends his regrets and we'll have the opportunity to hear from him, please God, in the future. But before we even begin our conversation, we're so deeply indebted and grateful to Sam for being with us this evening, to his wife Bila, who's here tonight. Sam would like to say some words before we begin.
I just want to say it is a great honor for me to be here. This great congregation, what we have there, and all the distinguished rabbis. So it's really a privilege and an honor for me too. The other thing I just want to add to this story, that tonight and tomorrow is Yom HaShoah V'Gvura. It's the day is designated because on 27 of Nisan was the end of Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And this is the day when the uprising ended. So the Knesset in Israel decided to have Yom HaShoah on this day. So thank you.
Okay, we're getting the other microphone up and running. But in the meantime, again, it's a great honor. We've all read about and saw the story, Sam, just a month ago, this incredible reunion and the circumstances behind it. Sam is a longtime resident here in Boca Raton and a friend of our community, a dear friend of March of the Living, of which you've been on how many times?
I've been 11 times so much.
11 times on March of the Living.
And a lot of people in it. And we have a lot of people there. Particularly Rabbi Broide, I've been with him for 10 times on the March of the Living. And I hope there may be some people who've been on the march with me too. This was one of the great programs that we had. Now this year we couldn't go because what happened, right?
Corona. I know this year was supposed to happen.
The only thing I will tell you is see, I am a Holocaust survivor from Poland. The tragedy is that we only survived very few. Very few of us survived Polish Jews in the camps. Now a lot of people survived in Soviet Union, a quarter of a million. Some people survived fighting in the forest. Some children survived in the monasteries. But from the camps, it was only 70,000 of us Polish Jews survived. And a few of us are still alive there. Not only this, you could see Jack, the same age as mine, and he couldn't come today. So a lot of my people were down there. So it's a privilege for me to be here today. And I represent 100 years of Jewish experience, almost 100 years of Jewish experience. I'll be happy to answer any question or the Rabbi would ask me about it. Because the main thing I want to tell you something, that the reason that I could make this house, I had a great start as a young man. I was born in a proud Jewish family, traditional Jewish family. I went to a cheder, and I went to study Hebrew. And in the last year of the war, before the war, I went to a Hebrew high school in the city of Krakow, because I was born in the little town 30 miles away there. So I had a good education. I was good looking too. I was a good student, but I got from my parents, from my grandparents, that I could fight the Germans. I never fight them with the arms, but I fight them, and I'm still here.
Absolutely incredible. Sam, we're so grateful that you're still here. We're grateful for you being with us here this evening. I want to take a step back really and thanking all those who are here in attendance in person. It's not a simple thing in our time, but the importance of showing up on Yom HaShoah and honoring the Kedoshim, the martyrs, and honoring our survivors and showing them the respect. You are our heroes. We can't begin to fathom what you went through and your dedication and commitment to rebuild. And we are only here as a Jewish people because of you, your resilience and your faith and your fortitude and your optimism and your hope. And so we, the Jewish people of today, are so deeply indebted to the survivors. We wouldn't be here without you. And I want to thank those who came tonight, those who are here in person, and those who are watching virtually, who are part of honoring you. And Sam has a cousin, Rella Feldman, one of my mother's closest friends I grew up with. So we're practically mishpacha.
Almost mishpacha with the Rabbi.
Almost mishpacha. Through our mutual, his cousin, our mutual dear friend. And we want to get into your life story, and we want to learn from you. And we're grateful for people who've never been on March of the Living or went back. You can't imagine what it's like, not physically grueling, but emotionally. And for a survivor to go back to Poland, for a survivor to go back to walk the camps in which they suffered, is to live a nightmare over and over and over again. So Sam, that you did it 11 times, and you only did it so that our students would learn and would hear, and the young people would get testimony from someone who experienced it. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment, and thank you for going back so many times. So Sam, before we begin with your life story, walk us through 1 month ago. You were an honorary chair of a dinner for the Holocaust Museum, and you were speaking, At the podium, you mentioned your original name. Your name was not Sam Ron growing up in Poland. And what happened? You mentioned your name, and Jack was sitting in the crowd. What happened?
Not the name. I was mentioned that Kemper was in there. As soon as I said Pionki, the man jumped up from the seat there. He came over running to me and said, "You're my brother." I haven't seen him for 79 years. We were working in the same place for 8 months, not only in the same camp, but at the same place. We were working in a powerhouse for 8 months. And he was lucky. It's the first time he came to that event. I've been there every year. So that's a miracle, I guess, another miracle. So we became very friendly, and I talked to him. We just yesterday we had 2 hours interview with the Miami Herald. It's in the paper now. But he called me. He went to the doctor and doesn't feel good. But that's what's going on. You know, I lose a lot of friends there. So as long I can talk, and I remember I'll be talking. I'm doing this for 60 years, trying to educate, particularly the Jewish kids. Particularly when we're going to the March of the Living, we get kids, boys and girls who's ready to go to college next year. I try to give them a lot of hope and a lot that they should advocate our issues there. So that's very important there. Then we talk to schools to non-Jewish kids. Maybe it will help. Maybe one day we'll have a better world than we have now.
Can you describe for us, what did it feel like when you saw and when you were reunited with Jack? Did you remember him from the camp? And what was it like? You never knew what happened, that he survived, he didn't know you survived. What did that feel like?
In the first minute, I wasn't sure yet, but then he came over and we started talking like a veteran. It was an amazing story because I met survivors all the time, but this is something unusual there. When there 400 people around, there, all the newspaper. For the last month, I didn't stop one day. Every television in the country, every newspaper, everybody bothered me now. So it was a great thing because very few of us still alive, So I was reading in the news today in Israel. Last year, 15,500 survivors died in Israel. So we are very few of us are still alive. I'm 97. I'll be 98 in a couple months. Yeah, I'll be. I live in a wonderful place here on the Federation ground in Sinai residence. Rabbi Broide is my mentor, spiritual mentor.
Yeah. How about the Torah?
In Poland too.
The Torah? Are you dedicating a Torah at Sinai?
Yes, I did. We just
Mazel tov.
They're writing it down.
Amazing.
So, if you want me to talk about, I'm not going to talk to you about history and what happened in the Holocaust. I'm just going to go through to you how to feast to be in a certain situation. Should I do that?
Sure.
Okay. Now let me tell you. And at age 15, when I was 15 years old, the German attacked Poland. They came to my town after 4 days. After a couple of days, let me tell you, life turned upside down. We lost our dignity. We lost our freedom. Everything we lost. The first thing, we couldn't go to school anymore, Jewish kids there. They took most of the business away. In the city, we are not allowed to leave the house there. And then they had an armband. First winter came, they took our force away. In my town, they killed a couple of people that gave up their force. And then what happened is slave labor. Everybody's slave labor. Let me tell you, how is the feeling this? My parents were well-to-do. We're not very rich, but we were well-to-do. My father was an ardent Zionist, and was a progressive person there. So there was a sugar factory in the town there. So we were doing a lot of business with them. So I used to have it. I could have gone in there every time we did there. And then one day, I became a slave labor in that place. How it is feast today. The guy, when I walked in there, before I was somebody, right now I was nobody. I was a slave labor. So it continued like this. In the big cities, they create ghettos. At Warsaw, they have 500,000 Jews. Krakow, all the big cities. In my little town, it was a little town, a population of 3,000. There were 60 Jewish families, and so we were in an open ghetto. We still live there.
What was the name of your town?
The town was not as big as the neighbors. In Yiddish they called it Kashmirs. It was 30 miles north of Krakow. So, but my family, I was born there. My parents were born in the city. My two grandmothers were born in that same city. We lived there for many, many generations. Most of us doing well. There was a lot of anti-Semitism. There's no question about it. But happened personally, we didn't suffer personally. This is how it works there. There was a lot of anti-Semitism, but my family didn't suffer.
Where did you go to Cheder with such a small town?
I went to a Cheder. I started out probably 4 or 5. What we learned is, this is how we were teaching,
In your small town? There was a Cheder in the small town, or you had to go to Krakow?
No, we had Cheder in the place. After school, Cheder. But then I had a teacher, a tutor. I was teaching Hebrew. I was very good in Hebrew. I was attended in a Zionist scout organization, so I was very good in Hebrew. I was very good, and as a matter of fact, when I went to high school in Krakow last year, in the city of Krakow, it's a wonder. It was the greatest city in Poland, Jewish city. There was 4 high schools. There was 252 synagogues in that city. I don't know how many yeshivas, how many stables are there. And the Jewish cemetery. But you know what happened is that I started in September, and in October, the Germans expelled 26,000 Jews, Polish citizens from Germany. And so what they did, they came to my town, they took away our student hall. This was the first experience. And you know what happened is that there's a Jewish kid, Klinsmann, in Paris. His parents was among the survivors. He assassinated a German. So next day we had a Christmas. That was my first experience. I'm going to little brag about myself. So next thing, on Hanukkah, there was a big event in a Jewish theater. I had the privilege to light the candles. I was in Hebrew. I was good Hebrew there. So I was always a good Jewish kid there. And then what came in the spring, the white paper came, British. So I think that year, made my character, my Jewish character today. So now, you know what I'm telling you? Later, when they create ghettos, and I lived in a ghetto. And then what happened is, in January 22nd, 1942, there was a conference in Wannsee, in Berlin, and they decided on a Jewish solution of Jewish people that we needed. So what they did, created gas chambers, camps like Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, Majdanek, Birkenau, where millions of people were straight gas there. So in 1942, when time came for my city for deportation, we went in hiding, with Polish friends in hiding. Now, let me explain this, how to face this. On midnight, Saturday night, we walked out from our house. We walked out, nobody was chasing us. We walked out from the house, but we had a grandmother, over 90 years old. We couldn't take her with her. So, the emotions, we didn't say nothing, but we know that next day she'd be killed. I'm just telling you, emotions what happens. And then we walked in a barn. 8 people in a barn.
Was it difficult to find a neighbor who was willing to take you?
No, we had very good Polish friends. They didn't do it for money either. I just want to tell you.
They risked their lives to do it.
Yeah.
They were willing to risk their own lives.
Yes. So we lived in that barn after 2 or 3 months, but there was things was dangerous outside. There was a lot of people executed. So my parents decided we smuggled ourselves into the ghetto Krakow. We smuggled ourselves in. You know, I thought we were smart. The German didn't care that you get in, they wouldn't let you get out. So anyhow, so I spent some time in the ghetto Krakow. I'm not going to make it short. So finally, ever seen the Schindler's List movie? Anybody seen the Schindler's List movie? On March 15, 1943, they liquidated the ghetto. So we were working in different places. We were marched in to the ghetto Plaza. So this was as a suburb of Krakow. And there was 2 ghettos in the Krakow, A and B. In the A and B were over 2,000 people. They were killed. Most of them was shot. You'll see it, or probably she was this. Then I get to Plaza. Now let me tell you this. The first 3 days when I was in the camp, I was burying. They were bringing in the people from the ghetto to bury in the camp there. You know, what we were doing for 3 days, you wouldn't believe this. I found a friend of mine, you know how that feels this. A friend of mine was dead, I buried him, you know. This is unbelievable.
How old were you?
I was 43, 17. 17. Yeah. So the camp of Warsaw was probably one of the worst things. I was in there because there was a crazy guy who was in charge. Amnon Gett was his name. He could shoot anytime one shoot. And then there were other things like this. There were selections on the place there. You know, selection, everyone stand there. Anybody they don't like, they send them to Auschwitz. I was seeing like women standing behind me, pinching her ticks, you know. She wanted to look the place there. Then there was execution there, hanging, you know. It was a terrible place. We're not very hungry over there. Finally, by September, I was coming home from work. I put in a stockade, and the next day, they take us in the cattle cars. It's the first time I walked in a cattle car. You know how it feels to be in a cattle car. First of all, you don't know where you're going. Whatever they tell you, you don't believe what they say. When they show that door, 100 people in the cattle car, they put a bucket of water and a bucket of sanitation. And let me tell you, you become an animal there. I've been 4 times in cattle cars there. You know, there was a movie, The Shoah, where most of the time you hear the tracks there. The tracks of the noise of the tracks stayed in my head all the time. Never let me, the noise of the tracks there. So finally, we get to a place. It was Pyongyang. This guy was working there. So they unload us there and they put you in the shower.
Were any members of your family with you at this time?
My family, I had all my family in Plastic. When I left my family.
You left the family
behind. My mother, I didn't know at that time. My mother was on the same train to another place there. And my father, my brother was still in.
Did anyone else survive?
My father survived 1,000. He spent the whole year in an American hospital in Austria. And my mother survived in Gross-Rosen, the Russians, the liberator. And my brother died for a week, 2 weeks before the end of the war. He died in my house. So I get to Pyongyang. You get in the shower. Now you don't know what's coming out from the end there. You look there, it'll be gas or water. You don't know this. When water came, you know, we start singing as a Hebrew song. You know, so finally I get in the new camp. I I spent a year in that camp there. That Yonki was, we were hungry, we were dirty, it was not very, very bad. Hard work. This is why I worked with Jack for 8 months in one place there. And then, so there was all I think it was. Jack, in 1944 in summer, when the Russian army was get closer, they stopped. They had a half of Poland. They stopped at the Vistula. Our camp was 6 miles away from there. So as they were planning to take everybody to Auschwitz, Jack ran away with the gas there. We were planning, we were digging a tunnel to get it out there. But when the time came, 4 guys left, 2 of us didn't stay. So I didn't. One of them survived from the fort. So what happened there is that they stopped working. There was a big ammunition factory, one of the largest ammunition factory. And the manager, the owner of the company, he didn't want to go to the war, to this. He got permission to move the machinery to Germany to rebuild the factory. So he got permission to take 300 Jews to Germany. So one day, I'll make it shorter. One day, I went to work on Saturday. I came back. All the 3,000 people went to Auschwitz, and we remained the 300 people. And finally, they told us that we're going to go to Germany. Eventually, we got to Germany. I got to Sachsenhausen, Oranienburg, in August 1944. But, when we got to Sachsenhausen, we were sitting on the cobblestones of this great station. They didn't want us. They didn't want the dirty Jews. They didn't have Jews in Oranienburg at that time. The only Jews they had in Oranienburg was people were printing horse money. I don't know if you ever seen the movie there. There were about 200 printers. They printed British money there. But there were no Jews. They didn't want us. But they didn't have any choice. After 6 hours, we marched to the camp. And we get again in the shower. Well, the shower, they cut it, and then they put DDT on us. You know what DDT is? Yeah. And they gave us paper clothes, no shoes, and they put us in isolation for 3 weeks. If we get well, then we can go back. Then they took us to a place where the machinery was, in another campsite. The problem was in Germany in the war there, we were hungry. 8 months hungry. You have an idea what 8 months hungry is. You know what our menu was there? In the morning after roll call, you get coffee. It looked like coffee. Then we go out to work, you come back, you get soup. But closer got to the end of the war, you couldn't find a piece of wood in that soup. And then on Sunday, you get 2 slices of bread. It was nothing unusual. You wake up in the morning, and something next to you is cold then. So hunger, I had no idea. I can't explain to you what means hunger. It was terrible. I mean, it doesn't matter how hard work, hunger was the worst thing there. I had some good jobs one time in Germany, Yeah, I guess take time.
Take time, yeah. That's why we're here.
So I was in Oranienburg. They took me to Berlin, 10 people, and we were digging out unexploded bombs, 250 pounds. The Americans or the British were dumping. And then they had a German fireman who took care of the detonation. But what happened is, the good thing about it is, there were IR raids. So they showed us with the Germans, and they showed it. And we get in there and find a scrap of cigarette, a scrap of apple. So that was a good job. This was the end of the war for the 8 months. The worst thing, I cannot stress this about the hunger. And then what happened? In our Sachsenhausen, we had a red triangle. And then for the Jews, they put a yellow triangle on the other way, so it looked like a Magen David. So one day there were rumors that this is the end, we're going to. No, I never liked rumors, but they always like, Next day, they're going to separate the Jews from the rest of it. That means the Jews is a bad idea. So what we did, two of us, we pulled off the yellow, and then we became Polish prisoners. So next morning, the roll call, we have to set up by nationalities. So we decided we're going with the Poles. So as we go in with the Poles, they kicked us out. They said, "You dirty Jews, go to your own." But the guard didn't know what's going on. He pushed us in with them. So anyhow, we just went on. But let me tell you, this was beginning of a death march, April 11 or 12. It's very interesting. Then on 12th of April, a guard came over and he said to me like this, to us, "Your uncle just died. Who's will die?" That was my uncle. So this is the end of you guys. Your uncle just died. But that's another story. So when we walked out from the camp there, they gave us a fresh bread for 6 people. I cut my part, I get my part, I finish on the spot. For 2.5 weeks, no food was given. For 2.5 weeks, no food was given at that march. So the first week we marched, anybody stepped out, got shot. No Christian, no Jew, no judge. The second week, anybody stepped out, they didn't care, lay on the ditch. Now, we know this, what happened is, Himmler was the head of the SS. He started making some deals with the Swedish people who want to save himself. So they stopped shooting, and Swedish ambulances came and picked up these people from the ditch. I would never walk in an ambulance because the German always camouflaged there. So finally, the third week, they walked us in the forest, like 2,000 people in the forest. No food was given. People were eating the barks on the trees. I went with my wife. We visited in Poland in '89 in Germany, and we went to that place. The bark on the north side of the trees never grew up. Wow. On the north side of the trees, the bark never grew up. So hundreds of people died there. I was with one. I had one friend. So we were watching each other. One was sleeping, one was watching because the guys were shipping the blanket and the shoes. So finally, on May the 2nd, 1945, at midnight, the guards disappeared and we were left in the woods, in the forest. And I was free. My nightmare of 5 years, 9 months was over at that minute. I became a free person, a survivor. I became a survivor at that.
Where did you go from there?
So first of all, we had settled down in the city, Shereen, for a while, 2-3 weeks there. There was a lot of stories about it. We walked out of the city, and I seen some American soldiers doing the traffic. The side, the 2 guys standing there. I don't know, it was my idea or the other guy. That guy looks like Moshe from Brooklyn, one of the soldiers. So we went over there and he asked, "Are you Moshe from Brooklyn?" He said, "I'm not from Brooklyn, but I know a little bit of shit." So he took us in an apartment store and told us to take anything you want. I received them. Well, we spent a few weeks there, and finally I went back to Poland. Now, in Poland, we were not very welcome in Poland, not welcome there. 1,500 survivors was killed by Polish nationalists after the war. And there was a big pogrom in Kielce, the 42 Jews were killed there. But anyhow, so I went back to the city of Krakow because this is why I knew the city. And there was a Jewish community. And there was a book on the table, anybody comes, sign his name. So before I sign my name, I'm flipping around pages, and I find my mother's name. My mother's name and an address. So I just took off like a story, to see my mother. So I knew the city, I knew the place.
That's when you learned that your mother had survived?
Yes.
By seeing her name in that book?
Yeah, because she came back from Gross-Rosen to Krakow. So I knocked on the door, nobody answered the door. The janitor comes out and said, I knew the janitor, she worked for my uncle. She said, your mother's in hospital. I said, what do you mean? She's not sick, but her sister is in hospital. So I sit on the steps waiting, I don't know how long, an hour, 2 hours. Finally, my mother came. Now, do I have to describe you the emotion? After 2-3 years, I didn't see my mother. My wife says, make up a story, don't make it flat, don't make it clutchy, she said. But, so I said, why is my sister in the hospital? She said, we went back to the little town, Kazimierz. We stayed with a Jewish man who survived there. And one night they came some bandits or nationalists and whatever. So my aunt jumped out on the window, she broke a leg, and my mother too. So they went to the hospital in Krakow. So my mother said, don't go back to your house. I own a house there in the city. So I never went back to my town.
Wow. So many questions and so much to talk about.
Yeah,
Tell us the name Sam Ram. How did you weren't born with the name Sam Ram.
The same name now, I blame my wife for it. She's an Israeli born after we married. She changed my name. My name was Lakoff. She changed my name to Ram. But I'll tell you, this is very interesting because I don't know. I had a cousin. They told me that one of my cousins who survived in the Soviet Union was an officer in the Polish-Russian army. So he was in the city, my mother said, go see Adam, So I went. So I stopped in the city of Katowice. And when I walked in the street, the guy stopped me. Oh, you see? Friend of mine. Joseph Wurstedt, same my age. He said, Sam, what are you doing? I said, I'm not doing nothing. I don't know. So why don't you join me? He was working for the Bricha. So I joined the Bricha. What the Bricha is, we smuggled from Eastern Europe all the Jews out to Italy, and then they went on illegal ships to Palestine, to Israel, Eretz Israel. So I joined the Bricha.
Amazing.
So I worked on the Bricha for a while, for a whole year. Now I find my father in the hospital. And eventually, I went in 46 to Eretz Israel. I went on illegal ships because we had permission to take 1,100 young people legally. So I was a madrich for 130 kids. So I went to Palestine or Israel, Eretz Israel, and came in April the 24th or 25th. So what happened? We got to instead of 1,100, we had 1,300. So the British put us in a fleet in detention. But after a few days, we got.
How long did you stay in Palestine?
Palestine, I don't call it Palestine, we call it Eretz Israel. I lived 10 years in Israel. 10 years. Yeah. When I went to Israel, I joined a group of survivors. We were waiting for a place to get the settlement. Now they call it settlement, but that was an issue. So on the spring of 47, I went we created, it wasn't in a kibbutz, Nevatim was in the Negev. The mosque was a post there. So we were 30 people there. I was the executive director. I'm a skill. So we were there in the Negev, and just make it short there. On November the 29th, they decided in the United Nations, as soon as they decided nations, the Arabs started shooting us. So 10 days later, hundreds of Arabs attacked us. And I was wounded in another fellow. But it was a very amazing story because the Negev was cut off from Israel. So we had a pilot on a little plane, a piper, and he used to come bring the mail to us. So one day he come with the mail, he seen that Arab shooting. Yeah. So he went back to another place, Betesha, this Betesha that's Avraham Avinu, actually next to the Shiva. And he took a guy from the Palmach, and he opened the door and they came back. They threw a few hand grenades and a few. There's a movie showing the sons of water, but they didn't. So the Arabs disappeared. But meanwhile, I was wounded and another guy was wounded. So he was wounded worse, the guy. So he took him first. He couldn't take two people in that place. So he took him to Tel Aviv, and then he came back after me. But meanwhile, British military came over to help us. So the guy, my medic could not stop my blood. They helped me, the British medics. And then they took me to Betesha, and then the piper came back and took me to the hospital. That was and the 10 or the 10 or 12, I was wounded.
Wow. So Sam, your story is extraordinary. And listening, all of us listening, you were hit by a Polish family, and you went to concentration camp, slave labor camp, death march, and even after being liberated and having a second new lease on life, you're shot at by Arabs and injured.
I served the Israeli army.
Served in the Israeli army.
Yeah. And then finally, I married my wife, Bila. She comes from a Moshav, Yarkona. There's socialism there, Moshav. We married in 49. I left the kibbutz, and then I had a good job there. And we lived for 10 years. We had 2 children in Israel. My life was teaching in Israel. I had a very good job with a good company. What happened, my parents lived in Ohio, and they got sick, ill. So they asked me to come back to them. So in 56, we went to the United States on a visit, and we stayed in there. I had to take care of my parents.
It's not too late. You can still make Aliyah. It's not too late. So it's a remarkable story. It's an incredible story. And here's my question, and I'm sure it's on the minds of many. Listening to you, Sam, you're describing the worst atrocities in the history of mankind. And yet you still have the ability to smile and to laugh and to be joyful and to be positive. How? How is that possible? How after everything that you went through, did you not give up hope in humanity?
I told you at the beginning, I had a good start. A good start. My parents, my grandparents. My mother told me that I'll make it. I had a story, I'll tell you what the story. When I was in the 5th grade in the Polish school, there was 3 Jewish kids there. There's 1 boy and 2 girls. And in the 5th grade, Jesus was on the wall, they were praying there. Yeah. One day, the guy in English called me dirty Jew. You know what Sunday? I picked up my ink and I spilled on him there. And I get up, I said, who's moving now? And they kept it. So I came home, my mother said, you will make it.
Incredible. You have an amazing attitude. Sam, I want to ask you as a follow-up, a serious question. There are many people who go through a lot less than what you did, who don't believe in God, they don't believe in Hashem anymore. They give up on Judaism, they give up on the religion, and we don't judge people who went through what you went through. Of course, we don't sit in judgment of others. But I want to learn, we want to learn and be inspired from you. How do you maintain Amunah? How do you maintain your faith in Hashem? How do you maintain a commitment to Judaism and to Jewish continuity after everything that you went through?
This is a very complicated question about Hashem. I'm not going in this about Hashem, what happened. Yeah, the only thing I am a Jew with all Ramachai Varim Yehudi. I happen not to be a member of this congregation. I'm a member of the Reform Temple, but I am still a very good Jew. I sweat in Israel, and I get blood in Israel, and I suffered for 5 months, and they never cut me down. They never cut me down. I never gave up. And the same thing I'm doing now, and I'm teaching the kids not to give up. Yeah. I'm teaching them 2 things. Hate not to use hate. Hate is not a good thing for you. What's the hate doing? It doesn't do good for you if you hate somebody. It doesn't hurt you. But that's what I'm teaching the kids all the time. Hate and hope and believe in yourself. You get someplace.
Amazing. When you were in the camp or on the death march, did you see kindness? Did you see kindness between people when people were trying to survive?
No, there was no kindness. I don't want to say this. Even in the cattle car, there was no kindness. No kindness. I don't think so. I haven't seen it any. Well, we were friends, but everyone was horizontal.
Everyone was trying.
That's my opinion. There's a lot of stories. Rabbi Lau has a story about that kid to the Kaddish. I have never seen this anything there. I've been 5 years and 9 months. I try to stay alive, that's all.
Yeah. Now this week, the Torah portion that we'll read, it's called Acharei Mos, which is after Aaron lost his 2 sons. Acharei Mos, after tragedy, there's rebuilding and there's rebirth. And that's your story, certainly coming into the state of Israel, the rebirth. What was it like to go from thinking this is the end of the Jewish people, this is the end of our story, to after 2,000 years seeing the miracle of the birth of the state of Israel, to live both sides of that and to be present for both parts of it? What was that like?
I did my part. I was in the army. My wife was in the army, So I did my part.
But when you were living through the atrocity, did you think it was the end of the Jewish people?
No, well, something, in the camps, always looking to survive another day. I didn't know. We didn't know what's happening the rest of the world there. We know that millions of people were dead, but we didn't know this. There was no, some rabbis have miracles. I have not seen anything. I don't say it was a miracle that was survived anyhow.
You sitting here, you're the biggest miracle.
That's right.
Sitting here right now.
It was a miracle. Last month, Jack,
It's a miracle of Jack. The state of Israel is a miracle.
The state of Israel is a miracle, right?
It's a great miracle.
My wife was in the army too, and she wrote me a letter. She said, "I'm writing you a letter in Eretz Israel, but when you finish the letter, we state of Israel." I was in the Negev in the army, so we believed in it.
Right.
We worked hard for it.
You believed it was coming. Yeah, we're in the period. We're in the period of Sfiras Omer. We're counting the Omer in between Pesach and Shavuos, and each number has a Kabbalistic theme to it. And the number that we're going to count tonight is Hod Shebekvura, is the splendor, the glory of strength. And you are a model and an inspiration of strength, of a physical strength to endure and survive, but a spiritual strength and a positivity and a hope. And I want to ask the last question, is that, please God, we'll have you and Jack and survivors, please God, still for many more years. But there'll come a time that the young people will live in a world without survivors. What's your message to them? What's your message to us? What do you want us to know? And what do you want us to believe? What do you want us to fight for? You mentioned what you tell the young people, but what's your message you want to leave us with tonight?
There's one thing that after we gone, there's a museum in Washington, there's a museum in Dayton, there's a museum all over the places. There's it's a big show of business, a lot of people writing stories. Well, I hope that we will overcome all the troubles we have in Israel. I am not very much worried about anti-Semitism in America. It doesn't bother me. Sometimes I think anti-Semitism is good for the Jews.
Why is that? Why is that? Why is that?
Well, in this way they remind the Jews they have to be Jewish. Somebody tells them, even if you're not Jewish, the neighbor tells them he's Jewish. So, you can never assess a Pintele Jews. Know the Pintele Jews?
Pintele Yid.
So our strength is in whether we believe or we don't believe or become we Jewish. We suffered for 2,000 years. We lived in Poland, we lived a good life. Most of us, a lot of us lived a good life in Poland for generations. My family, from my father's side, had the biggest state in Poland, there was a lot of poor people, a lot of anti-Semitism, but we lived there happily. So, Am Yisrael lo yishaker. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. Am Yisrael Chai is lived forever.
Am Yisrael Chai. What a great place to leave it. Tremendous thank you to Sam. Sam, you're one of our heroes. Hashem should bless you with good health. Hashem should bless you with good health and strength. And joy from your family. Many more years together with good luck.
I had a great family. We created a great family. So Jack had a great family. You come from New Jersey, my family, my friends, all these rich guys in the business there,
The builders.
There's a lot of poor Jews too. We here I am on a advisory board for helping survivors. In this half country, we have 260 survivors. We are helping here. There's a lot of poor people. There's a lot of them. A lot of them did good.
Beautiful. Sam, thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing your story. We'll ask everyone to remain standing, and Brother Bima is going to lead us in the Kalmah. Sam Ron, the great Sam Ron. What a story, what a demeanor, what a disposition, wow. What a person.
Wow. And even at the end there, when he was saying how he is helping 260, he serves on a committee or on a board, which they're helping those survivors that are the ones that are in poverty, the ones that need our help. And the question is, where are we? He's 98 again, and he's the one that's doing what he can to help them.
But you see his strength. You see his strength, his character, his positivity.
It's hard not to smile during the entire interview.
You're a little guilty smiling at Yom HaShoah, but then you realize he's the survivor telling his story, and he's smiling. What do you think of that comment he made? He covered his mouth. He leaned over and he said, "I'm not worried about anti-Semitism in America. A little anti-Semitism is not a bad thing." Again, if you and I said that, it'd be in hot water. It'd be getting a lot of emails. Here you have somebody who, survivor.
No, but it's definitely. Listen, we're not saying. I guess no one wants to get in trouble, but the reality is that when the Jews have faced a lot of anti-Semitism, they've. It's not about fighting back. It's about galvanizing as a community and standing up for what they believe in. And we've seen throughout Jewish history, whenever we've had it good, whenever we've had it, had that opportunity to coast a little bit.
Yep.
Things don't work out well for us. So
it's been said that in Europe they tried to kill us with hate. In America, they're killing us with love. You look at the assimilation, the intermarriage rates, and it's not always great. Jews forget they're Jews. They forget why be Jewish. They forget the importance of the Jewish story and of Jewish continuity. You recall on a March of the Living, I got in big trouble. You and I were at the Warsaw Cemetery, standing around a Warsaw Cemetery. We're at a mass grave, and I was at
Warsaw. It was Warsaw.
And I spoke about the fact that, talking to a group of public school kids were going to go back and they were going to secular colleges, universities. And I said, to the degree that you assimilate and you lose or forget your Judaism, if you were to intermarriage and end your family's Jewish story, you become an accomplice to Hitler's agenda. And there was an adult on the trip who was very unhappy with me because we see, if intermarriage is in your family, either you oppose it, you fight it, and you do everything you can to try to thwart it, or you just move the goalposts and you embrace it and you come up with new definitions of it. And we, of course, with love and with warmth and welcoming and respect, but we have very clear definitions of who's a Jew and what defines a Jew and the Jewish story and the Jewish continuity. And you're seeing parts of the Jewish people hemorrhage and disappear. And that was Hitler's goal. Hitler's goal was a world free of Jews. And you can get free of Jews through gas chambers and crematoria, and you get free of Jews through assimilation and intermarriage. And that person was very, very upset at me for saying it. It's a personal offense for saying it. But I stand by it. It's many years later, and I stand by it, and I'd say it again. Is it the most effective thing to say? I don't know. kid going to college campus today, maybe we have to make a more compelling or persuasive or sensitive argument. Maybe that's not the way to say it, but the idea of it and the principle of it, I still stand by. What do you think?
The challenge is that you said that 20 years ago. Now, if you would say that in front of those kids, remember, there's a good chance that I'm not saying on our buses from our community, it might be a little different in terms of statistics, but in the greater Jewish world, 70, 80% of their parents are intermarried right now.
Right.
And when we have adults coming on our trips, the assumption is that a significant number of them are also. So it's a complicated statement. It's one thing you're talking to, the audience in the shul or behind the Bima. It's another thing when you're out there. It's
no, I agree. So what's the argument? You're talking to a kid who went to public school, whose parents on the periphery of Jewish life, who maybe had a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, confirmation, whatever they had, but they really are not living.
I'll tell you, I'm not going to make this comparison because I'm just going to try and just maybe flex a little bit. I mean, if you this past week in Yevamos, when we're talking about the definition of the moms are, and this is not the same thing. Let's just be clear. We're not talking about the same thing, but the question there became, at least in the shir, was, Ellie was talking about, was the, why would you blame the kid for the fault of the parents, so to speak, whatever that means, and getting into that philosophical discussion a little bit.
That is a big philosophical discussion. And if you had to bet which host of Behind the Bima would be quoting Yevamos, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be you. I'm just saying I wouldn't have bet it'd be you. But Rabbi Broide, we'll come back to our Rabbi Broide Torah learning update. Now he's wearing a jacket. Look at him.
That's Yom HaShoah. I just gonna I'm taking it off.
We'll come back to the Rabbi Broide Torah learning update in a moment. But what would you say? A kid comes from a home where they did not observe. He doesn't have a Jewish education. He's going off to a college campus, and you say, "Hey, buddy, hey, young lady, remember you're Jewish. Don't forget your Judaism. And be friends with everyone in the world. But when you're looking for a spouse, do not marry outside our people." And they say, "Well, why not? Really, I'm just a human, and I'm looking for another human. It's all about being a human, and they're a good person." What are you saying to them?
Yeah, so
you persuaded them?
So first of all, for the record, the last speech that I give, and I guess I took it out of your playbook, was, it's always at the at Treblinka around the roast, what they call the roast. It's again, without getting into what it was, you could obviously imagine when you talk about roasting and the Holocaust. But the message that I give there is, bimkom shein ish, yishtadu yelos ish, and be that next link in the chain, and intermarriage is a big part of it. And most of the time, the adults that are there, because the adults are at that point as we begin to transition, as we go to Israel, there are many that come over, pat on the back, but what's interesting, what I learned also, the pat on the back is not that I'm not going through the challenges that you're speaking about. It's usually that I am. And I'll say it also. It's my family, both my uncles, right? They intermarried. All my first cousins are Broide first cousin are not Jewish.
Yeah, there's almost no family. There's no family.
But I think everyone just recognize. I think that the answer to your question is that people do recognize the challenges that are there, and it needs to be said. Let's just put it on the table and.
Well, maybe we'll talk about it next week, because we're not suggesting that if someone's intermarried, we should shun them. We're living in a different world. We don't today sit shiva for them.
Right.
If we want to have any hope or possibility of a proper conversion, or they're coming back in the future, you need to leave the door open. So we're not suggesting that. I'm not even at the point of they are intermarrying. I'm talking about, how do you make the argument? How do you make the case? And by the way, is anyone doing it? There was no one better to have done it than Rabbi Lord Sachs, Zichron Levracha. And he did in some ways. I'm not sure he did explicitly. Did he ever write a book? Now, how do you address? You have a room full of non-observant, with no Jewish education, young Jews, and you're trying to make the case for them why be Jewish.
Right.
How do you make the case? Why?
It's very hard. And from their perspective, again, you're excluding, why we're all part of the modern world, and why can we all you're being, I don't know, I'm not going to say this correctly, but it's like you're racist by saying you have to only be with the Jews, and you're not
supremacist, you're discriminating.
Right. Discriminating.
Yeah. I once had a father who was not a member of our shul, but asked me, this goes years ago, because I was assistant rabbi. My office was all the way on the other side, and that wasn't a flex. Like I remember, our offices are on two sides of the building. That's all. And that father meet with me, called me. Someone recommended he meet with me, and with his son. His son was dating a non-Jewish girl. And this was, let's just say, maybe a Sephardi father who wasn't observant himself, but the thought of his son intermarrying, I think he might have killed his son. Like, it would have been a murder on our hands.
Right.
So we're sitting there, and the father, he's geared up. He says, Rabbi, this is my son. He's dating a non-Jew, and this can't be. And he thinks I'm going to tag team with him and partner with him and come out and rail against the son. And I turned to the father and I said, no, I understand it. I really, it's your fault. It's like I took my own life in my own hands.
Yeah.
He turns to me, the father's like, what are you talking about? It's my fault. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you keep kosher? He said, no. I said, do you keep Shabbos? No. I said, so you're not willing to sacrifice a cheeseburger for the religion, but he's fallen in love with a girl who he thinks will make an amazing wife, an amazing mother. She's got all the attributes he's ever looked for, kind-hearted, good, and he should sacrifice that. You're not willing to sacrifice your Saturdays, but he should sacrifice what he believes should be the mother of his children. What does he see you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to give up? What are you doing and observing in your life? And then I tried to pivot and say, so, buddy, you're not off the hook. I'm not telling you what you're doing is okay. What I'm saying is get educated, learn and practice and try out this religion and see what you're walking away from and giving up. Be an educated customer, an educated consumer for those who used to shop at Sims, but be an educated consumer. And if you're making a choice to walk away from Judaism, then do it as a choice. Right now, you're not doing it as a choice, right? You have no education about Judaism. You have this huge temptation to walk away. Level the playing field. Learn and practice and experience. And now, as an educated person, you want to walk away, you're walking away. But at least give yourself a shot. Don't do something you'll regret before even giving it a shot. And I said basically to the dad, show him, model it. It's not too late.
Right.
Take it on now. What are you willing to work on now? You want him to give up? What are you willing to give up? You want him to try it out? What are you willing to try out? And show him. I don't know whatever happened, so don't ask me because that was that one meeting, but that was the posture. So it's a complicated question.
It's complicated, and we can never forget, right? Is that the further we move away, the generations and those children, that guy's children, his grandchildren, they don't even know. And it's not the blame is it's like it's not. It wasn't a choice at that point,
right?
Like they're so immersed in a different world right now where no one's choosing to leave.
The numbers are startling. The hemorrhaging is startling, and the impact in the future is startling and troublesome. And and Yom HaShoah, one of the things we face is not just the anti-Semitism external to us, which is trying to eliminate our people, but we have to do. I think on Yom HaShoah, it's appropriate to do a introspection and gut check internally. What are we doing?
Yeah,
to make sure that we're continuing, which is a perfect way to end. Rabbi Broide. Give us, first of all, thank you again to Bruce and Jill Minsky, my Machatanim, my beloved family, the Minskys. Just spent Pesach with them. They were down here for Pesach, and it was great to be together. It's the best thing because then you don't have to split your children, their time, and who cares about the children, but their child, the granddaughter you get to just have. So it was great to have the Minskys here, and thank you for the sponsorship this evening. Rabbi Broide, close us out with your update. We had Rabbi Eli Stefanski. He challenged you during the show, sign up for his daf, and what's been happening since then?
I got to tell you that like you always talk about those moments in your life that was like a game changer. I don't know how much longer I'm able to do this because it's the pace is like a really fast pace right now, but he really changed everything. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what it was, what kind of turned on, what the switch was. I can't figure out if it's the chevra of guys that you just keep feeling. There's a constant encouragement every day, whether it's the photos or the emails, constantly pushing each other. Even if you missed a day or you missed something, just start again. It's like you never feel like without the chevra.
Right. And
it's great. But then I think what happened over Chol HaMoed, this was the most exciting part. I got up and I gave some speech, at the Boca Point Minyan. And I was speaking about how, I probably heard this from you, Chol HaMoed is a vacation, but don't take a vacation from Torah. So let's all get into it. Now, I think I was just talking to myself because, it's not a big minyan. There's 15 guys there. And at least at that minyan. And I said, let's just all do it. And I said, we have more time. It is Chol HaMoed. You don't have the same responsibilities. And yet we find it that it's usually the time to take a vacation. And then I was like, you know what? I love that Mishnah Berurah. It's been so long. I love learning Mishnah Berurah. And then I was like, you know what? I was looking at my bookshelf, consolidated a lot just to the things that I really wanted to get to, and I've just never gotten to. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing Mishnah Berurah already. And it was the same day as the Omer. So I'm like, you know what? Day one of the Omer, Siman Aleph Mishnah Berurah, Siman Aleph of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
So what's the Rabbi Broide routine? We're not going to say what it used to be because we're not going to say that. But what's the Rabbi Broide routine now? It's the daf, Mishnah Berurah,
Kitzur Shulchan Aruch,
Mesilas Yesharim,
Nefesh HaChaim.
You're back in yeshiva.
I'm back in yeshiva.
Unbelievable.
I'm back in yeshiva, and you know what? It feels great. It's just hard.
can
It's just,
see it.
I woke up this morning. I was up at 5:30. I was normally go to the gym, and I was like, still have to like catch up. So I'm doing Hilchas Tzitzis. These are the simonim you would skip over because it's so
Right.
technical.
Right.
The length of the strings and how do you tie it and what's it made out of?
Let's really close out with a Mrs. Broide reference because you haven't brought up your mom in a long time. I met today with Mrs. Broide
Okay.
and her co-chair for the Empty Nester group. It was just simply a check-in, Empty Nester, how it's going, what can we work on? But they sit down and your mom says, what did we do wrong? I said, what did you do wrong? I said, nothing. It was great. She's like, why'd you call us in? I asked Josh, and Josh had no idea. Why'd you call us in?
First of all, she didn't believe me.
I said, so, and then her co-chair says, if we're here because you want us to be on Behind the Bima, we're not doing it. So the truth is that was the reason I met with them. I wanted them to be on Behind the Bima. Mother's Day coming up. But instead, we just talked about the empty nesters and what we can do and ideas of programs and how we can expand. And they're great. Powerhouses, they're great. They've done great programs. And for years, they've been serving and fantastic energy. So
one second, before you close out, like I'm saying, Pesach for you, what did it do? We'll have
to wait for next time.
Post Pesach, I'm saying, what are you feeling right now? Like, what are we going into?
I feel great, invigorated, and it was a great Pesach. Great Pesach. Ton of guests, packed house,
standing room only, every minute. Right.
Best layout for Pesach ever. The whole Chol HaMoed, the 2 Shabbases. It's good for people taking off work. It's good for rabbis and people who cook to not have to constantly produce. The whole layout of the calendar this year was just optimized. Had great Siddharim. It's great. It's amazing. It's great. It's the best. Feels so blessed. Great weather. Unbelievable. Boca in almost May, and we had beautiful weather. Beautiful weather. Davened at Boca Point, on satellite one day with you. It was great. We'll do more. We'll do more next week.
Oh, you know what? I forgot. I'm doing the Chayenu also. Don't forget Tehillim, Tanya,
Chitas. You're doing it all. Got every minion in the shul covered, Brody. It's a beautiful thing.
I'm loving every second.
It's a beautiful
3 weeks of Achremos. It doesn't get any better.
Unbelievable. All right. Thank you again to Sam for sharing your story with us. Big thank you to the Minskys for sponsorship. And in memory of dear grandparents and Rabbi Broide. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay